For 3 long years, my children believed I had abandoned them. They believed I stopped loving them, that I had moved on, that I didn't care if they called, if they cried, or if they needed me. They believed it because their mother, my ex-wife Marissa, fed them those words day after day, year after year. She told them, "Daddy doesn't care about you anymore. Daddy chose his own life over you." And they believed her, because when a child hears the same poison over and over, it starts to feel like truth. I cannot explain the pain of watching the light in my son's eyes fade when he saw me, or the way my daughter stopped running into my arms after school. Caleb, my boy, once begged to go fishing with me every Saturday. He used to sit on the edge of the dock, grinning ear to ear as he reeled in a catch, yelling, "Look, Dad, I did it." Now he could barely make eye contact. And Lila, my little girl who once braided my hair clumsily and laughed when I pretended to be a princess, pulled away when I hugged her. Their hearts had been turned against me, not by their own will, but by the lies whispered into their ears. The final straw came at Caleb's graduation. The day was supposed to be a moment of pride, a milestone that a father dreams of. I had spent months saving every dollar I could to make sure I could give him something meaningful. I wasn't rich. I worked long hours as a mechanic, often with grease still on my hands when I came home, but I never stopped loving my children, and I wanted him to know it. But Marissa had a plan of her own. She had mocked me for years, telling the kids I was worthless, and now she wanted the whole world to see it too. When my son's name was called and he walked across the stage, she leaned forward in her seat, raised her voice loud enough for the entire section of parents to hear, and said, "His father is too broke to even buy him a gift." I could feel the weight of 100 eyes turned toward me. Some looked away quickly, pity in their faces. Others shook their heads as if to say, "What a shame." The humiliation burned in my chest. Every muscle in my body screamed to get up and leave, to run from the stairs, to hide from the judgment. But I didn't. I stood. I walked down the aisle, and with every step, the auditorium seemed to grow quieter, as if the whole place was waiting for me to prove her right. When I reached the stage, I carried nothing flashy. No shiny box, no expensive gift bag, no bouquet of flowers. I carried a single white envelope. Caleb looked at it with confusion as I placed it in his hands, and in that moment, with Marissa smirking in the crowd and the audience holding its breath, my son opened it. What he found inside was not money. It was not a gift card. It was something far more powerful, something that told him the truth I had been screaming in silence for years. That moment changed everything. The lies crumbled. The poison lost its grip. The entire auditorium, every single person who had pitied me, saw the truth of what a father's love looks like when it refuses to be erased. This is the story of how my ex-wife tried to destroy my bond with my children, how she almost succeeded, and how a single envelope on the biggest day of my son's life gave me back my family. Before everything fell apart, I was a simple man living a simple life. My name is Daniel Rourke. I never cared about being rich or famous. I cared about my family. I cared about being the kind of father my kids could depend on. I worked as a mechanic, and while the pay was modest, the pride I felt in providing for my family was greater than any paycheck could measure. My hands were always rough, stained with oil and grease, but when I came home at night and my kids ran into my arms, I felt like the richest man in the world. Back then, before the divorce, Caleb was 13 and Lila was 10. Caleb admired me. He would sit in the garage, legs swinging off a stool, watching me tinker with engines. He would ask 100 questions about tools, about how cars worked, and I never got tired of answering them. I remember one evening, he looked at me and said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to fix things like you." I carried that moment in my heart like a treasure. Lila, my little girl, was full of light. She loved to paint. She would sit at the kitchen table with brushes and watercolors, covering the paper with messy rainbows and flowers. Often she painted me, her mother, and Caleb, all holding hands, smiling in bright colors. Sometimes she would add the dog we didn't even own, insisting we needed one. She would say, "One day, Daddy, I'll paint us with a puppy in the picture, and then we'll go get one." I would laugh and tell her, "Maybe one day." I thought our family was unshakable, but love can be fragile when bitterness takes root. My marriage to Marissa had been crumbling long before the divorce papers were signed. She was beautiful and charming when we first met, but over the years her heart hardened. Arguments grew sharper, colder. She wanted more money, more recognition, more of everything I couldn't provide. She began to resent the life we had built together. What I saw as enough, she saw as a cage. When we divorced, she won primary custody. I was crushed, but promised myself I would never disappear from my children's lives. I told them, "No matter what, I'll always be here for you." At first, it seemed like we could make it work. I had them every other weekend, and though the house was quiet when they weren't there, those 2 days were filled with laughter, games, and long talks. But slowly, something began to change. The phone calls grew shorter. Caleb started making excuses not to visit. Lila stopped telling me about her school projects. When I asked them what was wrong, they shrugged or turned away. I could feel them slipping from my hands, but I didn't know why. Then the small comments began. Caleb once said, "Mom told me you're too busy to really care about us." Lila, on another day, whispered, "Mom said you have a new life now, and we're not part of it." My stomach turned when I heard those words. I knew exactly what was happening. Marissa was filling their hearts with poison. She wanted them to believe I had abandoned them, that I had stopped loving them. I confronted her once. I said, "Why are you telling them lies about me? They're children. They don't deserve this." She laughed, a cruel sound, and replied, "I don't have to lie, Daniel. They see who you are. You're broke, you're boring, and you're barely in their lives. They'll figure it out on their own." Those words cut me deeper than any knife. I tried harder. I sent letters every week, even when they went unanswered. I called, even when no one picked up. I showed up at games, sometimes sitting alone in the bleachers while Marissa whispered to the kids not to wave at me. My mother, Evelyn, tried to encourage me. She would say, "Don't give up, Danny. They'll see the truth in time." My brother Jonas was less gentle. He would slam his fist on the table and say, "She's turning them against you. You can't just stand there and let it happen." But what was I supposed to do? If I fought too hard, I risked losing the little time I had with them. If I stayed quiet, the poison spread. By the time Caleb was finishing high school, I felt like a stranger to him. He spoke to me politely, but without warmth. He didn't laugh at my jokes anymore. He didn't share his dreams with me like he once did. Lila followed his lead, quiet and distant. Her head always lowered when I spoke to her. It was like watching the bond we had built crumble in slow motion, and no matter how I tried, I couldn't stop it. Graduation day loomed ahead, and I told myself that no matter what happened, I would be there. I had been saving every spare dollar I could for months, not for something flashy, but for something that mattered. I wanted to give Caleb a gift that showed him I had never stopped loving him, never stopped caring, never stopped trying. What I didn't know was that Marissa was planning to use that very moment to break me once and for all. She wanted the world to see me as worthless. She wanted my children to see me humiliated, and she almost succeeded. The months leading up to Caleb's graduation were some of the hardest of my life. Every phone call felt like I was reaching into a void. When Caleb did pick up, his answers were short, polite, but distant, like he was speaking to a stranger. "Yeah, Dad, I'm fine. School's good, football's fine." Then silence, followed by, "I have to go." It was like talking to a wall that used to be my son. Lila was no better. She avoided my calls entirely, and when I did get the chance to see her, she sat across from me with her arms crossed, eyes on her phone, waiting for the visit to be over. At first, I blamed myself. I wondered if I hadn't done enough, if I had let work consume too much of my time, if the divorce had made me blind to their pain. But deep down, I knew it wasn't me. It was Marissa. The small comments from the kids confirmed it. One evening, Caleb slipped and said, "Mom said you didn't even try to get custody because you didn't want us." My chest tightened, and I fought to keep my voice steady. "That's not true, Caleb." I fought as hard as I could. "The court made its decision, but I never stopped wanting you. You're my son. You'll always be my son." He shrugged, looked away, and said, "That's not what Mom said." Another time, Lila whispered as I tucked her into bed during one of my rare weekends, "Mom says you'll forget us when you start a new family." I froze, staring at her small face. "Lila, listen to me," I said, holding her hand. "I could never forget you. You and Caleb are my heart. There is no new family that could ever replace you." She didn't answer. She rolled over, clutching her pillow, and I knew the poison was spreading deeper. My mother, Evelyn, could see what was happening. She sat with me at the kitchen table one night, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "Danny," she said softly, "she's filling their heads with lies, but love has a way of surviving. You can't let her take your hope. Keep showing up. Keep writing. One day, they'll see the truth. Jonas, my brother, was less gentle. He came by the garage one Saturday, watched me wipe grease off my hands, and exploded. 'You're just taking this? She's brainwashing your kids, and you're standing here changing oil filters like it's nothing. Fight her, Danny. Take her to court again. Don't let her win.' I slammed the hood of the car shut and snapped back. 'What do you think I've been doing? I've spent every dime I have on lawyers. The system doesn't care. All I can do is keep trying, keep showing up.' Jonas shook his head, frustrated, but he didn't understand the tightrope I was walking. One wrong move and I could lose what little access I still had. The closer graduation came, the heavier the silence between me and Caleb grew. I had dreamed of this moment for years, watching my son walk across that stage, cheering him on, telling him how proud I was, but now I didn't know if he would even look at me. I saved money anyway, every spare dollar tucked away. I wanted to give him something real, something that proved I had been there all along, even when he thought I wasn't. Then I started to hear rumors. Other parents told me that Marissa had been talking, loudly and often. She told people I was broke, that I was pathetic, that I was only coming to the graduation to embarrass Caleb. One mother from the football team pulled me aside and whispered, "Daniel, I don't know if you know this, but Marissa is telling everyone you can't even afford to buy Caleb a gift. She says you're going to show up empty-handed." My stomach churned. She was preparing to humiliate me not just in front of my children, but in front of the entire community. The night before the ceremony, I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the small white envelope I had prepared. Inside were 3 years' worth of letters. Letters I had written to Caleb every week. Letters that had been returned unopened, stacked in a drawer like tombstones of a relationship that had been strangled by lies. I had kept them, every single one. I wanted him to see them, to know I never stopped writing, never stopped trying, never stopped loving him. I imagined the moment 100 times. Would he throw it away? Would he laugh in my face? Would Marissa snatch it out of his hands and rip it to pieces? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but the alternative, doing nothing, was worse. If this was the only chance I had left, I would take it. The morning of the graduation, I dressed in my best clothes, though they were worn at the edges. I polished my shoes until they shone. I looked in the mirror and told myself, "You will not run. You will not hide. No matter what she says, you are his father, and he deserves to know the truth." As I walked into the auditorium, I could already feel the weight of Marissa's presence. She sat in the front row, perfectly dressed, her smile sharp as a blade. Parents leaned toward her, whispering, laughing quietly, glancing at me with pity or disdain. I kept my head high, but my heart pounded in my chest. Every step forward felt like walking into enemy territory. This was it. The moment I had dreaded and prepared for. The poison had done its work. The crowd was primed to see me as the failure she had painted me to be, and in just a short while, when my son's name was called, everything would come to a head. Graduation morning carried a weight heavier than any other day I could remember. The sky was bright, the air was warm, yet I felt like a storm was pressing against my chest. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at a man who looked older than his years. My hair had more gray, my hands bore the scars of years in the garage, and my shoulders carried a burden no one else could see. But behind the tired eyes was resolve. I knew today was not just about my son receiving a diploma. It was about reclaiming the truth that had been buried under 3 years of lies. The envelope sat on the kitchen table, small and unremarkable. Inside it were letters I had poured my heart into, week after week, for years. Some written late at night after long shifts, some scribbled during my lunch breaks, others carefully crafted on Sundays when the silence of the house reminded me how empty it was without my children. Letters filled with love, encouragement, apologies for the divorce, and promises that I would never leave them. They had all come back, unopened, shoved through my mail slot or marked return to. Sender, I saved them anyway, every single one, because some part of me believed that one day they would matter. Now, that day had arrived. I had thought about buying a watch, a laptop, or something expensive that would make a statement, but the truth was I could not afford those things. More importantly, I realized no material gift could say what those letters could. They were proof that my love had never faltered, even when Marissa did everything she could to convince the kids otherwise. As I buttoned my shirt, my mother, Evelyn, called. "Danny," she said softly, "are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. My voice was steady, but my hands trembled. "Don't let her break you today," she urged. "She'll try. You walk in there with your head high. Caleb will see you. He may not show it right away, but he will." After hanging up, I sat for a long moment at the table, staring at the envelope. I whispered, "This is for you, son. For every time you thought I didn't care, for every lie you were told, for every moment I wasn't allowed to be there." Then I slipped it into my jacket pocket and walked out the door. At the auditorium, the atmosphere buzzed with pride and excitement. Families filled the seats, parents dressed in their best clothes holding flowers and cameras, ready to celebrate. I scanned the crowd and spotted Marissa immediately. She was dressed elegantly, hair styled to perfection, her smile sharp as if she had already won a battle I had not yet fought. She leaned toward another parent, whispered something, and laughter followed. I knew the words were about me. I felt Jonas's hand clap my shoulder. He had insisted on coming for support. "You've got this," he muttered, his voice low but firm. "She doesn't get the last word today." "I don't know if Caleb will even open it," I admitted. "He will," Jonas said, "and even if he doesn't right away, he'll keep it. That's enough." We found our seats, the ceremony began. One by one, students' names were called, families clapped, and graduates walked across the stage to shake hands and smile for photos. My heart raced with each name, bringing me closer to Caleb's turn. Then it happened. "Caleb Rourke," the principal announced. Caleb rose from his seat, taller than the boy I remembered, his face serious, his steps steady as he crossed the stage. Pride swelled inside me, even through the ache. He looked so grown, so strong, and I wished with everything in me that our bond had not been fractured by lies. As he reached the center of the stage, Marissa's voice cut through the auditorium. Loud, sharp, designed to wound. "His father is too broke to even buy him a gift." The words hung in the air like poison. Heads turned. I felt dozens of eyes burn into me, some with pity, some with judgment. I could almost hear their thoughts. Poor man, useless father. Maybe she was right. For a split second, I wanted to vanish. My legs screamed to get up and leave, to escape the humiliation. But then I thought about Caleb. About the boy who used to sit on a stool in the garage asking me endless questions. About the boy who once said he wanted to be like me. About the letters he never saw, the words I had poured onto page after page. This was not the time to run. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I stood, my movements calm but deliberate. The crowd quieted as I walked down the aisle toward the stage. Every step felt heavy, but also certain. Marissa smirked, expecting me to crumble, but I kept my eyes on Caleb. He looked confused, uncertain as I approached. When I reached him, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope. My hand did not shake as I placed it into his. For a moment he just stared at it, unsure of what it meant. The audience leaned in, waiting. The tension was thick, the silence louder than any applause. I spoke softly, but firmly enough for him to hear. "This is for you, son." In that instant, everything hung in the balance. Would he open it? Would he reject it? Would he see the truth or turn away? This was the turning point. My decision had been made. I had chosen love over shame, truth over silence. The rest was in his hands. The entire auditorium was silent as Caleb stared at the envelope in his hands. His fingers brushed over the seal as though he were holding something fragile, something alive. For a moment, I thought he might shove it back at me or drop it to the floor. My chest tightened as the silence dragged on. All around us, parents and students watched, waiting for a scene they would gossip about for weeks. Marissa's smirk deepened. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, satisfied that her plan was working. I could see her eyes glinting, daring me to feel the humiliation she had promised. Then Caleb slipped his finger under the flap and tore it open. The faint rip of paper seemed to echo across the auditorium. He pulled out the folded stack of letters, tied neatly with a thin piece of string. His brow furrowed as he untied it and looked at the first envelope. His own name was written on the front in my handwriting, dated nearly 3 years earlier. He opened it and began to read. At first, his lips moved silently, scanning the words. The letter said, "Dear Caleb, I hope school went well this week. I miss you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for your practice, but I was watching from the parking lot. You played hard. I'm proud of you. Love, Dad." Caleb's lips trembled. He reached for another letter. "Dear Caleb, I know things are confusing right now. I just want you to remember that none of this is your fault. I love you more than anything. I'll always be here when you need me. Love, Dad." He kept flipping through them, letter after letter, each one a piece of my heart preserved in ink. The audience leaned forward, whispering in shock, realizing what they were, witnessing. The lies Marissa had spread for years were unraveling right there on the stage. Caleb's hands began to shake as he opened another. His voice cracked as he read aloud, "Dear Caleb, I'll be at every game, even if I have to sit in the parking lot. I'll never stop cheering for you. Love, Dad." A hush fell over the room. Parents who had once looked at me with pity now stared at Marissa. Her smirk vanished, her face tightening as if the walls were closing in on her. She shifted in her seat, eyes darting nervously, no longer in control of the story. Caleb dropped the stack of letters to his side and looked at me. His eyes were red, tears streaking down his cheeks. He whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "You wrote all these? You never stopped?" My voice broke as I answered, "Never. Not for one day. You were always my son. I never stopped loving you." Without hesitation, Caleb stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Some clapped quietly. Others wiped tears from their eyes. On stage, in front of hundreds of people, my son held me like he had when he was little, gripping me tightly as if to make up for the years we had lost. From the corner of my eye, I saw Lila in the audience. Her hands covered her mouth, her eyes wide and wet with tears. She stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor, and ran toward the stage. She broke through the crowd and climbed up, throwing herself into my arms and Caleb's. "Daddy, I didn't know," she sobbed. "Mom said you didn't care, but you did, you always did." I kissed the top of her head and held both my children as tightly as I could. I always cared. I never stopped. You were never forgotten. The room was no longer staring in pity. They were witnessing truth. They were witnessing the collapse of lies and the triumph of a father's love. Marissa stood abruptly, her face flushed with rage and humiliation. She grabbed her purse, muttering sharp words under her breath, and stormed out of the auditorium. The same parents who once leaned in to laugh with her now turned their backs, unwilling to meet her eyes. Her power over the story was gone. Caleb pulled back slightly and looked at me. His voice was firm, but filled with emotion. "I thought you gave up on us. I thought you didn't care, but you never stopped." I nodded, brushing the tears from his face. "I never stopped, son." Not once. In that moment, everything changed. The years of distance, the nights of unanswered calls, the returned letters, all of it was washed away by the truth that now lived in his hands. He knew. Lila knew. And for the first time in years, they looked at me not as a stranger, not as the man their mother had described, but as their father. The principal, caught in the emotion of it all, cleared his throat and announced softly, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's continue the ceremony." But no one in that auditorium would forget what they had seen. No diploma, no speech, no award could overshadow the sight of a son and daughter discovering their father's unwavering love. As we stepped off the stage together, Caleb still clutching the bundle of letters, he leaned toward me and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up." I squeezed his shoulder and answered, "Thank you for opening that envelope." This section delivers the high-stakes emotional payoff. Public humiliation flipped into vindication. The letters revealing years of devotion, the reunion with his children, and Marissa's downfall. It leaves the audience deeply moved and primed for Section 6's reflection and aftermath. Would you like me to now expand Section 6, the aftermath, lessons, and conclusion, into the final 800-word piece, closing the story with emotional impact and a strong takeaway for the audience? You said, yes, move and avoid ellipses, and write in a clean, direct, emotionally engaging tone without unnecessary pauses or breaks. ChatGPT said, perfect. Here's the final section, 6, the aftermath, lessons and conclusion, written as a full approximately 800-word draft. It brings closure, emotional reflection, and a powerful lesson for the audience. The tone is clean, direct, and immersive, with no ellipses or unnecessary pauses. 6. The aftermath, lessons and conclusion. When we walked out of that auditorium, the air felt different. For 3 years I'd carried the weight of being painted as a ghost in my children's lives, but in that single afternoon, the truth cut through the fog. Caleb walked beside me, holding the bundle of letters tightly against his chest, as though he feared they might disappear if he let them go. Lila held my hand, clinging to me in a way I had not felt since she was a little girl. The parking lot was buzzing with families taking pictures, hugging, and celebrating. Parents handed their children flowers and gifts, graduates posed in caps and gowns, and laughter filled the air. Yet, in our corner of that lot, the world felt still. Caleb turned to me and said quietly, "I don't know how I'll ever make up for the years I doubted you." His voice cracked, and for the first time in years, he let me see the boy who had once trusted me completely. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "There's nothing to make up for, son. You were a child caught in the middle of something you didn't choose. None of this was your fault. What matters is that we have today and tomorrow." And every day after Lila looked up at me, her eyes red from crying, and whispered, "I feel so bad for believing her." I knelt down so I could meet her gaze. You were just listening to the person who was with you every day. You had no reason not to believe her, but now you know the truth, and that's all that matters. She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "I love you, Daddy." Those words nearly brought me to my knees. For years, I had dreamed of hearing them again, and now they were real. Later that evening, we gathered at my mother Evelyn's house. She had cooked a big meal, insisting that a day like this called for celebration. The smell of roasted chicken and baked bread filled the kitchen as we sat down together. Evelyn dabbed her eyes with a napkin as she looked at Caleb and Lila. "I told you," she said softly to me, "love always finds its way through." Jonas raised a glass of soda, grinning at me with pride. "About time those kids figured out what kind of father you are," he said. He wasn't one for sentiment, but I could see in his eyes that he was proud. Caleb unfolded a few of the letters and spread them out on the table. He read them again, this time out loud for everyone to hear. His voice shook as he said, "Dear Caleb, no matter how far apart we are, I'll always be cheering for you." He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw recognition in his eyes, the kind that says, "You were always there." I just couldn't see it. The lessons from that day etched themselves into me deeply. I realized that love is not measured by gifts or appearances. It is not proven by grand gestures or money. It is proven in consistency, in the quiet moments when no one is watching, in the persistence of trying again and again, even when doors are slammed shut. Marissa's cruelty had stolen years from me, but she could not erase the truth. She could not erase the nights I sat at my table writing letters to my children. She could not erase the times I stood in the cold watching Caleb's games from the parking lot. She could not erase the love that kept me fighting even when it seemed hopeless. And when the truth finally came to light, her lies collapsed under their own weight. I will not pretend that everything was instantly healed. Trust takes time to rebuild. Caleb and I had long conversations in the weeks that followed, sometimes painful, sometimes filled with tears, but always moving forward. Lila began to visit more often, bringing her paintings, sometimes asking me to sit with her as she worked. Little by little, the wall between us crumbled, and in its place grew something stronger than before. The community never forgot what happened either. Parents who once looked at me with pity began to nod respectfully when they saw me in town. Some even apologized for believing the worst. I didn't need their apologies, but I accepted them with grace because I knew the truth had already done the work. The greatest gift of that day was not vindication in front of others. It was not proving Marissa wrong or silencing her cruelty. The greatest gift was standing on that stage with my children in my arms and hearing them call me Dad again, with love in their voices. When I think back on it now, I realize the power of choosing to keep fighting, even when it feels hopeless. Every unopened letter had felt like a defeat at the time, but together they became the proof that saved my relationship with my children. Persistence is love in action. Refusing to quit is love in action. That is what I hope people understand. If you are a parent going through something similar, if you feel erased or forgotten, hold on. Keep showing up. Keep writing. Keep calling. Keep loving. Because the truth has a way of surfacing, even if it takes years. And when it does, it can heal wounds you thought would never close. That day at Caleb's graduation, I did not give him a watch, a car, or an expensive gift. I gave him something far greater. I gave him proof that I had never left him, that my love had never faltered, that no lie could ever erase a father's devotion. And in return, he gave me back something I thought I had lost forever, his trust, his love, and his place in my life. That was my story. It was painful, it was humbling, but it was also proof that love doesn't quit. If you've been through something similar, if you've ever felt silenced or pushed aside, I want you to know one thing: you are not alone. Love has a way of surviving, even in the darkest moments. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own family, or if it gave you hope, do me a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment telling me what you felt while listening. I read every comment, and your words mean more than you know. And if you want more stories like this, stories about resilience, family, heartbreak, and redemption, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss one. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share my story. And remember, no matter how much someone tries to erase you, the truth will always find its way to the surface,